Hi, my name is Shawn Fletcher. I'm with REMAX Oceanside here in Jaco Beach, Costa Rica. And the purpose of this video is to discuss ownership in Costa Rica as a foreigner. And I want to walk you through a typical purchase and discuss important topics such as financing, closing costs, title versus concession, residency, taxes, and homeowners associations, and a few other topics that are important. So if you are considering purchasing property in Costa Rica, this video is going to have a lot of helpful information for you. I've also put it into written form, so if you want to send me an email, then I can forward you my buyer's guide.
Okay, so let's discuss property ownership in Costa Rica as a foreigner. There are generally no restrictions for foreigners to own property in Costa Rica, and the Costa Rican Constitution actually affords foreigners the same rights as nationals when purchasing property. There's one exception, which we'll discuss later in the video when it comes to concession properties, but otherwise, you as a foreigner can own fee simple, fully titled property just as you can up in North America. And when you purchase property, the buyer and seller need to appear before a notary public in order to sign the transfer deed into your name. A notary public in Costa Rica also must be an attorney. And this transfer deed is then submitted and recorded with a central institution called the National Registry. And the National Registry, their position is to guarantee the security of registered property rights. It's a very secure system of owning property here in Costa Rica.
Okay, so let's talk about concession properties. Here along the coast, the first 50 meters from the mean high tide mark, no one can actually own or build in that area. And the next 150 meters beyond that, it's called the maritime zone or the concession zone. And in the concession zone, you can't actually own the property, you're leasing the property from the government. It's typically on a 20-year term, you pay an annual concession fee, and at the end of the 20-year term, you have to apply to renew that concession. There's another restriction for foreigners in that a foreigner cannot own more than 49% of a concession property. And so what foreigners do is they typically form a Costa Rican corporation, they become a 49% shareholder, and then they bring in a Costa Rican as a 51% shareholder, and then they have a private agreement signed between the two of them where that person has no rights over the property. Now, there is about 10% of the coastline in Costa Rica that is fully titled all the way up to the 50-meter mark, such as here in Jaco, where the entire beach is fully titled up to the 50-meter mark, which is why we have a lot of condo towers and hotels built up right up to the sand where you can have fee simple, fully titled property right on the beach here.
Okay, so let's talk about the purchase process now. It is incredibly important for you to work with a seasoned real estate agent because there's no MLS here in Costa Rica. Therefore, your real estate agent that you're working with really needs to know the market well, and they need to be able to show you all properties within your goals, preferences, and budget, and they need to understand the market. Once you have identified a property that you want to purchase, this real estate agent is going to draft a purchase agreement for you that's going to look a lot like a purchase agreement up in North America. It's going to first have the property details, and then it's going to have a deposit amount, which in Costa Rica a lot of times we deal with a 10% deposit, and that deposit is held in a third-party escrow company. Just a word of warning, escrow companies are probably going to be the most difficult part of any transaction here in Costa Rica because Costa Rica has very stringent anti-money laundering regulations, and so you're going to have to prove your source of funds. And I tell my clients, you're going to feel like you're a drug dealer or a money launderer until proven otherwise. They're going to ask for bank statements, tax returns, and other supporting income verification documents just to make sure that the money is clean. So your money is going to be held fully refundable in this escrow company for a term of normally 15 to 20 days if we're dealing with a standard condo or house. And during those 15 to 20 days, you're first going to have an attorney checking on the title to make sure that it's clean and transferable. There's no liens or encumbrances that's going to hinder the transfer title. We're going to hire a home inspector who's going to do an inspection on the house or condo. And then we're going to negotiate repairs with the seller. And so either the seller can agree to do the repairs before the closing, or they can give you a credit. If you can't come to some type of agreement on that, then you can walk away from the purchase and take your deposit back, no questions asked. We also do an inventory list during this period just to verify everything that's included in the sale. And once we've concluded with the due diligence period and everything is clean and understood, then really you can close at any time after that. Although we like to put a little pad, normally about 15 days on it. So a 30-day closing is very common in Costa Rica. The purchase agreement is also going to detail who pays the closing costs, and closing costs are significant, and so it's important to know that you have about 4% in total closing costs, and that is comprised of legal fees, which amount to approximately 1.25%. You have a transfer tax that's 1.5%. There are recording costs with the National Registry to record you as the new owner of the property that are about 0.87%. You've got a charge for the escrow company, and then there's some other little charges if you want to, for example, own in a Costa Rican corporation. There's a fee to set up the corporation, and the purchase agreement will also, of course, include when the closing date is going to be. This section is going to be about corporations. When you purchase property in Costa Rica, you can either buy under your personal name with your foreign passport, or you can set up a Costa Rican corporation, which is the equivalent of a North American LLC. And one of the benefits of purchasing in a Costa Rican corporation is, one, it does give you some liability protection. Here in Costa Rica, you cannot pierce the corporate veil, so any assets you have held in a corporation are protected that way. Let's give a worst case scenario. Let's say you come on vacation and you rent a car and you accidentally run someone over on the side of the road. Any of your assets that are within corporations would be fully protected from liability in that situation. Another thing that a corporation is good for is you can easily grant power of attorney for someone to sign on your behalf or to perform actions on your behalf without you having to be in the country. So a simple proxy can be emailed to you that you can sign and scan back, and you can give someone like me the power of attorney to, for example, change the name on your electric bill, or even sell your property on your behalf without you being here. And so you can detail that I grant Shawn the power to sign on my behalf for X amount of purchase price on this date, and then I can show up at the closing time, which I often do for my clients, sign for them, and then they can close without having to fly here and being here in person. A corporation is also beneficial in that you can set up a bank account down here in the corporate name and have less restrictions than you would if you were going to set up a bank account in your personal names. Now, the negative of a corporation, of course, is going to be the cost. Currently, it's running about $650, $700 to set up a corporation, and then you have annual maintenance fees. First of all, you have about $250 in a corporate tax that's payable every year, and then also every April, with the help of an attorney, you have to pay them to register the shareholders. The government wants you to register who all the owners of the corporation are, and that's going to run you another about $250. So you're looking at about $500 in annual expenses just to maintain the corporation. Now, if you purchase in your personal name, of course, you don't have any of these fees. The negative of purchasing in your personal name is that when you go to sell, if you are not a resident, then the government is going to withhold 2.5% of the purchase price in lieu of you paying the capital gains. Now, if you have a big gain from when you purchase to when you sell, then this doesn't matter, because then you would be liable to pay the 15% in capital gains. So you're going to pay the higher of the two. Now, if you were to sell for break even or a loss, then you would still have to pay this 2.5% withholding tax. So that's the only case where owning in your personal name would be detrimental. Okay, let's talk about financing in Costa Rica as a foreigner. So it is possible for a foreigner to get a loan with a Costa Rican bank, but to be honest, it's very difficult. The customer service is going to be frustrating. But several banks that are offering financing, one of them is Scotiabank, another one is called Banco Lafice, and they're currently offering interest rates of around 8.25%. And that is normally only fixed for a year or two, and then it becomes an adjustable rate mortgage for the duration of the term. The banks here are offering between 25 and 30-year terms. They're normally going to have a prepayment penalty if you pay off the loan within the first 10 years. They're going to use your income and assets in North America to qualify you. They're going to run your credit score from up there. And it's important to note that with any financing here, you're going to have added closing costs. You're going to have roughly 1.85% of the loan amount in legal fees and recording costs to record the lien. There's also going to be a small fee involved when you release the lien once you pay off the note in full. So since financing is pretty difficult with the local banks, we do a lot of seller financing. There's a lot of sellers who purchase property here. They bought it with cash, and it's a second or third home. So in order to help them sell, they'll offer financing to prospective buyer. It's so prevalent that it's one of the first questions we ask when we take a new listing from a seller. We ask if they're willing to offer financing to a prospective buyer in order to help sell their property. And our website even has a little checkbox that you can click on if you only want to look at properties that offer seller financing. Now, the thing with sellers is obviously they don't want to be the bank for 30 years. So oftentimes what they'll do is they'll amortize over a loan over 30 years to lower the monthly payment, but then they're going to have a balloon payment, meaning that the whole balance is going to be called due in 3, 5, or 7 years. Sometimes I'll see a seller going up to 10 years. Sellers are typically going to want 30 to 50% down, and the interest rates are going to be totally negotiable. And I've seen interest rates with sellers negotiated between 4 and 12%, although typically I see sellers trying to be somewhere close to what the local banks are charging. So if the local banks are 8.25% right now, you can expect interest rates from sellers to try to be around 7 and maybe 9% interest rates. Since financing is difficult here in Costa Rica, one of the best ways to finance a property is if you have the luxury of having equity in a personal residence in North America, get a home equity line of credit or a cash out refinance and then use those funds to purchase down here. And that's going to be your most affordable way to source financing down here in Costa Rica. Okay, so let's discuss real estate trends here in Costa Rica. And there's a common saying that if the United States catches a cold, we sneeze. And that's been pretty true from what I've seen in my almost 20 years of doing business here, but it typically happens on a delay. So if there's some type of negative news or recession fears or whatever happening up in North America, typically we start feeling that down here on a 6 to 8 month delay. But what I've seen is that our curves are not as steep as they are up north. I mainly attribute that to the lack of financing, which we just discussed. Since it's mostly a cash market, we have sellers who bought with cash, it's second or third home, so they're not tied to a mortgage that they need to get underneath with, and we just don't have as much of a buyer pool since it's typically a cash market. And so our listings don't sell as quickly as they do in North America, and that means our curves are not also as steep ups and downs as you have up in North America. We have steady, gradual appreciation, but just you don't see this type of thing going on. All right, now let's discuss homeowners associations. So if you're buying into a gated community, you're going to be subject to the rules and regulations of the condominium regime. And some important things to note are, for one, a lot of them are not pet friendly. So if you do have a dog or cat or multiple pets, make sure that you inform your realtor about this so that they can eliminate the associations that are not pet friendly. In the homeowners associations, you're going to have monthly homeowners dues. And I've seen those range between $50 a month on up to over $1,000 a month, depending on the services that they include. What I see is there's typically a big difference between North American run homeowners associations and Costa Rican run homeowners associations. North American run associations oftentimes include extra services to make it easier for the owner. For example, at this development that we're in, they include the water, they include cable TV, they include high-speed wireless internet, there's an on-site bilingual manager, and in Costa Rican run associations, normally that's going to all be a la carte. So in a homeowners association, you're going to own your condo, so you own the title to the condo, plus there's, for example, there's 36 units here, so you'd own 1/36 of all the common areas here. You would have a vote that is typically based on the square footage that you own or number of bedrooms, and at least once a year there's going to be an annual meeting where a majority vote can approve budget changes or personnel changes and such like that. It's really important if you're buying into a homeowner association to read the bylaws and also to review their budget and make sure that they have an adequate reserve fund so that you're not going to get hit with a special assessment that's going to come out of your pocket shortly after purchasing. So it'd be good to find out if there's any special projects that are on the books and something that you might have to come out of pocket for shortly after purchasing. Okay, so once you own a property in Costa Rica, let's talk about what type of monthly expenses that you can expect. Utilities such as water are extremely affordable. You're probably only going to have a $10 to $30 water bill at any property that you purchase. Electricity, on the other hand, can be quite expensive. And if you're in a beach community where you're going to have the air conditioner running quite a bit, you got to be really cautious about what your electric bill might be. I would actually ask the realtor to provide you with a number of electric bills just so you know what you're getting yourself into. There's a big difference between mini split and central air systems and whether or not they're efficient. These new mini splits, which are kind of these wall units you have can be very efficient if they're the new inverter technology. But I typically see electric bills between $100 and up to over $1,000 a month in these beach communities. You have cable and internet that usually comes in a package for about $65 a month, which would give you pretty high-speed internet. Here on the beach, you can get at least 200 megabytes per second. And then property taxes, that's the great topic because they're very affordable. They're 0.25% of the assessed value. And so, for example, on a $200,000 purchase, that'd only be about $500 a year in property taxes. There is an exception if you fall into what they call the luxury tax category. And that is if you have a construction value of over approximately $230,000. Then after that, there's a graduated scale, but normally it's an additional 0.25%. And that's only if you have a large residence with high-end materials that would fall into this luxury tax category. All right, now let's discuss residency. If you are planning to move here full-time or retire here in Costa Rica, then it's going to be advantageous for you to get your residency. Otherwise, you're going to have to leave the country every 90 days. When you arrive in Costa Rica, you get a stamp on your passport that allows you to stay for 90 days. With that said, the typical profile of the buyer that I work with is someone who's going to use their property for just a couple months or more a year, and then they're going to rent it out for the rest of the year. In that case, it may not be advisable to get your residency. Once you become a resident, you have to start paying into the CAHA, which is the social health care program, which you may not end up ever using. So I would only say it's worth getting residency if you're going to be living here full time. And there are three main ways that our clients apply for residency. The first one is through investor residency. And Costa Rica says that you can invest in a business or a property or a combination of items that are over $150,000. It used to be $200,000 and it was recently reduced to $150,000. So for example, you can purchase a property for $130,000 and then a vehicle for $20,000, and that would qualify you for investor residency. The second option is it's called pensionado or retiree status. And you'd have to show that you have a guaranteed pension of at least $1,000 a month. It could be Social Security. If you don't have that, if you're not yet retired, a third option is called rentista. And that is where you can show a guaranteed income of $2,500 a month. Or you could put $60,000 into a special bank account where you withdraw $2,500 a month, and that's your guaranteed income for 24 months. So those are your three main ways of qualifying for residency. The harder and more expensive routes would be to marry a Costa Rican or to have a child here in Costa Rica. But again, it's not necessary to be a resident in order to purchase property here in Costa Rica.
Again, I have all this information in written form, so if you want to shoot me an email, then I can send you my buyer's guide. Also, I know that each situation is different, so we can connect over the phone if you like, and we'd be glad to assist in your real estate search here in Paradise. My name is Shawn Fletcher. I'm a realtor with REMAX Oceanside here in Jaco Beach, Costa Rica, and I am your oceanfront and condominium specialist.